Hello everyone, so today I'm making a book review of Franz Kafka's The Burrow, which is a short story by the author. I read this text online, so I don't have a book to show you guys. So what is The Burrow about? Basically, the story is about an unknown or unspecified animal who lives in this underground burrow, which he has built with a bunch of different tunnels and storages. And the whole book is basically a monologue of this animal, or more like a ramble of his life in this burrow, how he has built it, and also about his worries, because he suspects or thinks that there are enemies, other animals, which are trying to intrude in his burrow. So who are these enemies which are trying to penetrate his burrow? So basically he has never, this animal has never seen the enemies. He can just hear them digging at some distance away. And this vagueness of the enemies, not seeing them but just constantly hearing them digging, creates a great anxiety for this main character, the animal. And he says that he wishes that the enemy would just appear, confront him face to face, so that he could tear them into pieces and kill them and just get them over with. So he doesn't fear that these enemies are actually physically stronger than him. He is sure that he can defeat them if in a confrontation, but his precise anxiety resides in the fact that they don't confront him. He just hears their gnawing and their digging constantly in the background. And this is the nature of his anxiety, of it being vague and unknown, them not having a face, him not being able to confront them. And I think this is a poignant image of the nature of anxiety that Franz Kafka gives to us here, because I think that anxiety arises not so much from the fact of a great fear that we know, but from an unknown fear, from the vagueness of the fear or the threat, not knowing. This is where the anxiety resides in, because in a confrontation with something horrible, we're not anxious. We might feel fear or other feelings, but anxiety resides in the fact of not knowing, not seeing the problem concretely, just having a vague feeling of there being something which you're not sure of. And I think this is why death is anxious for people, because death is the great unknown par excellence. So I believe that this story of the burrow is an allegory of paranoia. The main character fears that there are enemies all around him who are trying to intrude, and that's why he's built this burrow underground to shelter him from the threatening world around him. We don't actually know if this animal by nature lives in a burrow, but I get the feeling that this digging himself underground to protect himself is symptomatic of his anxious character and of his paranoia. The burrow, of course, also becomes a symbol for his comfort zone, literally. An isolated place where he's trying to shelter himself from the world around him. And like many other of Kafka's stories, we asked, or at least I asked the question, why stay in this burrow? Why not just leave and go somewhere else? This is also the case in Franz Kafka's trial, where a man is accused of a crime which he never finds out what it is. And instead of just seeing this as sort of ridiculous, he continues and pursues the case against him almost voluntarily, where he could have just packed his bag and left the city that he lived in, or at least not cared about that accusation. But it's like he himself believes that he is guilty in some way, and therefore pursues it and is attached to it so much. So in the midst of this, his self-isolation and paranoia anxiety, he experiences glimpses of contentment. So he describes how he loves the silence of this burrow and the occasional breeze that blows in. And then he writes, "Sometimes I stretch out and turn around in the tunnel, overcome with contentment." So I think this is a interesting juxtaposition, that in the midst of this sort of anxious, dark place, he has glimpses of contentment and joy. And another image of this double-sidedness of the anxious and the joyfulness is so he wants to create a solid wall within the burrow, and he's basically doing this. It's very tight, so the only way he can do that is hit his head against the wall to make it compact and hard. So he writes, "So with my forehead I ran against the earth 1,000 and 1,000 times, day and night, and was happy when I beat it bloody, for this was proof of the wall's beginning strength." So this bloody forehead and his joy at it is this twisted image of the double-sidedness of his pain, but also in some way getting a masochistic enjoyment from this pain, feeling pleasure and joy at his bloody forehead. And I'm pretty sure that the burrow is some sort of symbol of an inner state or existential state of Franz Kafka, or the human existence in general. So he writes that he could at any moment leave the burrow, but he doesn't. And he writes, "I am not entirely far from deciding to go away far, to resume the old bleak life that offered no security whatsoever. I've only one step to take and I'm safe. And I tear myself away from all doubts and run straight to the door in broad daylight, to open it with absolute certainty. But I cannot. I run over it and deliberately throw myself into a thorn bush to punish myself for my guilt I do not know." So in this complex sentence, we see that he could leave the burrow, but something keeps him there. As he says, he wants to punish himself from a guilt that he does not know. So this shows that the burrow is some sort of deep existential image of a guilt. And what this means exactly, I think it's very difficult to say. The whole story is very cryptic. And I think if you perhaps read all of Franz Kafka's work and read about his life, these pieces will fall into places. For example, guilt is a big theme in his works, and even unknown guilt. That is the whole plot of the trial. He is accused of a crime which he does not know of, but takes this accusation seriously, as I said before, because maybe he feels in some way that he is guilty of something that he doesn't know. And later on he describes that he falls in love with his burrow. He speaks to it as he would to a lover. So he writes, "Because of you passageway and squares, and above all your questions, Castle Square, I've come, sacrificing my life for nothing, after having so long the foolishness of trembling for its sake, and delaying my return to you. What do I care about the danger now that I am with you? You belonging to me, I to you. We are bound together. What can happen to us? Even if the people already thronging above, with their mouths already to tear the moss away." So this last part, tear the moss away at the mouth, is an allusion to the enemies who are intruding. At the entrance of his burrow, he has a cover with moss to cover it. And honestly, when I read this, I wasn't sure exactly who this "you" was referring to. First, I thought it was an actual lover or a person that he was speaking to. But he says very explicitly, "Because of you passageways and squares, and above all your questions, Castle Square." And these passageways and squares and Castle Square refers to the different places within this burrow that he has built. The passageways, the squares, which are the storages for his food. So I'm pretty sure that he is referring to the burrow itself, and his love for the burrow, which again shows at this double-sidedness, that the burrow is the source of his misery and anxiety, at his self-isolation from the world and his paranoia, but also something that he falls in love with. So the symbolism of what the burrow actually means is, I don't think there's one answer. There's many different, and it's very cryptic and very symbolic and very mysterious. But if I am to give my personal interpretation, I think the burrow is a symbol for Franz Kafka's writing. So Franz Kafka's whole life he spent working as a clerk, a miserable job that he didn't like, and in his free time in the night he would write stories, and this was his great passion for life. And he So he hated his job, it was a drag, and at night he would come home and write. And I think that the Burrow, or I think that Franz Kafka's writing, the fictional world that he creates, becomes a sort of shelter and burrow that he escapes from the real world from his work as a clerk, and which he sort of isolates himself in and lives in, and both becomes an object of his alienation from the world, but also a source of joy and pleasure. Franz Kafka has a quote somewhere where he says something in the style of, "I am literature and I'm unable to be anything else." So, and this just shows that he lives in his world of literature, which is more real to him, more important to him than the outside world, sheltered within his world of fiction.